Hey, how's it going? It's Neil Parfit here. Welcome to video number 20 of getting started with the ER301 sound computer. I'm pretty excited because yesterday, 0.2.0 firmware was released and still in beta, but there's a whole bunch of new units that make this module even more exciting. So I thought I'd just share some of it with you today. Let's take a look. So we'll go to User, and we'll go to Insert Unit, and let's check out and see what's new in the list. So before, we had a sample recorder looper and a sample player, and now we have a few more options here. We have a native player, and the only difference between this one and the sample player is there's no pitch control. So this one just offers significantly less CPU load on a sample being triggered, and this one's more ideal for drum sounds and like sort of one-off sort of sounds that you don't need to control pitch with. You still have full slicing functionality within, but just no pitch control, which is fine. There's always an option or an application for sample playback like that. Another one here is card player, and this one's pretty cool because you can load in or you can actually stream a sample off the card. The onboard RAM's about 512 megs, I believe. So this allows you to load content or play content that's longer or larger than 512 megs, which is really cool. And you can CV control the position of the file and the speed, which I believe changes the pitch. Let's actually just try that. I'm going to go load file. And this is actually going to be a really tiny file. I don't have an audio file on here larger than 512 megs, but let's just see how this behaves. So I'm just going to navigate on my card here. I'm going to go to recorded. Here's a sample I recorded earlier. And actually another interesting thing that's been added now is an audio file preview in the browser. So you don't actually have to load up files anymore to hear what it is. I can just click on this. Hey, this is just a recording test into the ER301 sound computer. Test, test, test. So I could be like, okay, I want this file, enter. Hey, this is just a recording test into the ER301 sound computer.
Test, 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 here it is.
So the speed actually does change the pitch.
Into the ER301 sound computer. Test, 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 here it is.
This is just a recording test. And you can see the counters, and you can see that the disk activity is constant because it's reading off this card directly. It's not in the sample pool.
Into the ER301 sound computer. Test, test, test.
So that one's interesting, especially for like longer prepared files, like really long drones and stuff like that. But the one that really caught my eye is, check this one out here. It's called manual grains. So let's add that in. Just like any of these other sample players, you have to assign a file to it or a sample buffer. So let's go to submenu. We'll go to assign sample. And I'm actually going to load up that file I just played. So let's just navigate through the file system here. I know it's in my 301 folder under recorded 0001, and there it is. So now it's in the sample pool, and I have to hit enter one more time to assign it to this unit. So what do we have? We have a trigger, volt per octave, speed, start position, and duration. So if I trigger this, it's going to trigger the start of that sample and play it for 100 milliseconds. So it's not too interesting by itself just doing this. But if we go in, let's assign this something quick, like a sine wave. So now if I adjust the duration, and I play with the start time, whoop, that's loud.
Hey, this is just a recording test into the ER301 into the ER301.
So I love this. I was waiting for this sort of functionality. So we can assign a volt per octave control. I can assign this the CV from my KB37 here, which is A1. And let's hear what that sounds like. Oh, I was on the wrong thing. Oh, I assigned the wrong thing, sorry. Volt per octave, and then A1. Pretty wild. But the amazing thing is all of these parameters can be controlled independently from an external source. So as an example, my speed, instead of an external CV source, I could actually add an oscillator here, like a sine wave, running really slow. And completely unrelated to that, I could have the start time modulated by, let's say, my modulation wheel on the KB37. So let's do that. And that looks like it's A3 on the scope. And what else do we have? I can assign the actual grain duration externally as well. So instead of external source, let's add a sine wave to that, so it's constantly shifting. Where is it? Sine oscillator. Set that nice and slow. And pretty weird. Really weird. Okay. So let me just, let's start again. Another thing you can do, let's go into manual grains again. I'm going to assign the same sample. I'm going to assign it a sine wave to trigger it constantly. So we'll go do that. Let's set the duration to like 200 milliseconds.
Hey, this is a recording test.
So if I actually perfectly move this encoder,
Hey, this is just a recording test into the ER301 sound computer.
If I did it slow enough, you technically have time stretching. So let's take a listen.
Hey, this is just a recording test into the ER301 sound computer.
And if I lower the millisecond duration of the grain, it'll be a little bit more coherent.
Hey, this is just a recording test into the ER301 sound computer. Test. Here it is.
So this is where it gets kind of interesting. So we have, let's go to our start modulation source and go to our unit list. In our list now, we have 2 additional oscillators available. We have an aliasing triangle and an aliasing saw. So because the saw is a perfect ramp, we could actually use this as a perfect sweep of that value, and then it will reset back to 0 when the waveform drops to 0 again. So let's take a look. We'll insert it. Let's set this really slow. And
hey, this is just a recording test into the ER301 sound computer.
see what that sounds like.
Hey, this is just a recording test into the ER301 sound computer. Test. Here it is. Hey, this is a recording test into the ER301 sound computer. Test. Here it is. Hey, this is just a recording test.
And I can still adjust the speed.
ER301 sound computer. Test.
Here it is. Hey, this is
A recording test into the ER301 sound computer. Test, test, test. Here it is.
So there's lots of potential here to come up with some really weird results. After this saw, we could put a track and hold here. Where is that? So as soon as we let go, it freezes it. So what I could do is my external source could be the gate from my keyboard, which looks like A2. And if we set the threshold backwards, it will only freeze when I press a key. Oh wait, let's adjust this a little bit better. Kind of cool. So weird. And we could put the volt per octave as my keyboard source. Oops. Oh, what am I doing? There we go, A1. So really weird results. Especially if I modulate the duration. Let's insert our triangle here. Set that nice and slow. Bit too fast, so we can go in there, slow that down. So weird. And our CPU use for this module, 19%. Oh, 10%. I guess it depends on how much you're shuffling the grains around, but still not bad for what it's doing. Oh, that's so weird. Let's add a delay after that for fun. What do we got? Where's my delay? That's so strange. And you could also do some pretty nutty things, like instead of a consistent sweep of the start time, you could instead take this all out. I could put in a noise circuit here. Let's say, where's our white noise? Put our white noise in, and then after that, we could put in a sample and hold. Where is that? And then we could trigger this a little bit more, a little bit slower. And then it will just pick a random spot in the grain to trigger. So you might get stuff, you might not. It's hard to know.
Just here,
That's so strange. So anyway, just an example of the manual grains unit, which has so much potential, especially if you have a looper before it recording in the audio in real time, and then that granular unit is feeding off that exact same file buffer. So lots of weirdness potential there. If we look at these oscillators, these new ones are triangles, pretty standard. Let's take a listen. We can assign our volt per octave to like my keyboard here. And we also have our saw, which we didn't have before, right here. Add pitch source to that. So lots of potential there, especially with detuning, using oscillator sync, all those sort of things. And of course, for parameters where you want a perfect sweep from 0 to 1, or like from lowest to highest in a perfect sweep, you set that oscillator slow enough, it's a perfect source for that kind of thing. And of course, you can still modulate the speed from another source, either external to the module or somewhere else within the 301. So tons of potential. I'm really excited. So I'll come up with something else that's a little bit more coherent once I have an idea for something fun. But I thought I'd just give a quick overview of these new units. All right, cheers.